on average, leaders spend about 210 hours a year on performance reviews. And so that's 5 weeks out of their year on performance reviews. And if they were helpful, then maybe that's time that's well spent. But the research also shows that about 30% of people after performance reviews have decreased performance because they are demotivated. Because if you talk to employees about performance reviews and what they're getting from that, they're typically past focused. They are not timely. And so I've just done all this great work, and you're pointing out to me the things that I didn't do well over the past 6 months. And you weren't there to actually help me and support me when that was happening. But now we're talking about it in December. And so what I think I've learned about performance reviews is that they were designed to capture the low performers. They are not designed to improve performance for the average to high performers. And so, yes, we build guardrails to capture the low performers, but do we build an entire system around those people, or do we build a system that works for average to high performers?
Welcome to Management Muse.
Because everybody deserves a better manager.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and today I have with me Collette Revere. She is the CEO. Hello. She's the CEO of Open 360, and we're going to talk about what you should do about the fact that performance management, the way we currently do it, is trash, should be thrown in the trash heap, and her alternative way of managing performance. All right, Collette.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here talking to you.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So tell me, where do we go wrong right now in performance management?
Oh, man. Well, I think it starts from the fact that our current performance management process is modeled after a World War I military process to determine who should rise in the ranks. So what we see with most of our typical performance processes in organizations is that they're hierarchical, top down, and there are rating and rankings, which that's where it came from. The ranking was part of the World War I process to determine who should rise in the ranks. And this process was introduced into the workplace really broadly in the 1970s and honestly hasn't changed much since. But if we
do a lot with businesses where it's like kind of a military model.
Yes, very much.
Like even strategy comes from the military.
Right. And, it has worked. That's part of the struggle with performance management is that it was useful and better than what we had at one time. And that's the struggle. But it's not that way anymore. Now it is creating a lot of administrative load and work. It is not helping people improve performance. And so what are we going to do about that?
So what changed?
So this is my theory based on my experience, but there are two things. One is access to information. So where the leader used to be the person that employees needed to go to find out how to do their jobs better, or to go to for information, a reference, a resource. Now employees have access to global experts at their fingertips. People who know more about probably what they're looking for than their own boss. And so that relationship is not as tethered to, I'm your leader, I'm the knowledge holder. That's no longer what a leader does. And so leaders are still incredibly important to help provide context, support, guidance, but they're not the knowledge holders anymore. The second thing is, anyone who grew up in the 80s or beyond is used to democracy. And so this authoritarian kind of hierarchical thing where I'm an organization, I'm going to pay you 6 figures to come in and bring your talent and the thing that I really need for you, but I'm going to insist on tying your shoes for you when it comes to performance management. That is not acceptable. And so what's happened is that, people are used to having a voice. They're used to being able to direct their lives, whether it's in school, whether it's on social media in their life. And then they come into work and there's this kind of superficial structure where, okay, you're kind of powerless again. And I'm the one who's going to tell you what to do. And I'm the one who's going to rate you. And yes, you're totally capable, but sit down and let me tell you how to do this. That just doesn't work for people anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how well it ever worked for people other than, like in a lot of the initial foundations of management were in factories.
Yes.
And, Frederick Taylor, pretty sure I got that right. Somehow it doesn't sound right. But Frederick Taylor did all those like movement studies, and really he's one of the unsung heroes for World War II, because without his curious mind in doing that, like our factories wouldn't have been able to ramp up the way that they did. But that is a particular kind and very specific and dying, at least in the US. I mean, there's always going to be manufacturing, but we don't really do a lot of it in the US. That's a dwindling model here. And so like most people are starting to lean more towards the knowledge worker, where you have a boss who, they're responsible for coordinating. They're responsible for sort of the checking in to make sure everything is actually functioning the way that they think. And there are a bunch of other functions too, but like that, primarily it's like coordinating support, efficiencies in there. But the worker themselves is often doing something that isn't actually in the wheelhouse of the manager. So like we're in a lot of hospitals, and it's pretty unusual to see a CEO who was a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
Not impossible, but not all that common. And that's fine, because like these are actually two separate professions. Like you have to learn how to be a manager. There are skills associated with that. And you have to learn how to be a doctor. There are skills associated with that. And the manager is basically overseeing the circumstances in which the doctor is doctoring.
Right.
And so there's this, you're right, there's this break in terms of like, we don't need them for the knowledge directly, and whether or not we need them or not to just continue our education is also a question mark, because especially like for in the example of doctors, there are outside boards that certify. There's, training that they can pick up on the internet pretty easily. Obviously it's going to have some validity in order to get credit for that. But all those resources are out there, and they're much more accessible than they've ever been.
Absolutely. And the example that you gave about the medical industry is really clean, because there are really clear standards for doctors and for what's required to be able to do the job. And then there's clear separation with leaders. But in most organizations that I've worked with, the doers become leaders as they progress in their career. And
they have that in hospitals too.
Yeah,
just to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. I mean, like it's the person who was the lab tech who did a fantastic job and eventually gets promoted into being director of the lab. Yeah. And that is also a problem, because again, management is its own set of expertise.
Its own thing.
And that's where we come in oftentimes. I think you do the same thing. Yeah. Like we come in and we basically help get technical people who now are in management, we help get them up to speed.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges for leaders is that we don't treat leadership as a separate set of skills, that when we promote leaders into the role, a lot of what I see leaders getting in terms of information is process information. How do I get in the computer and create a performance review? How do I do this? How do I follow the process of my organization?
It's checking boxes. Skills.
Yes, checking the boxes. That's exactly right. And that's all they have to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And so those are the two problems. We've got that there's no longer a a dependency between, or at least the dependency's been minimized to a large degree. There's no longer as much of a dependency between employees and their bosses in terms of information. And then there is sort of this cultural shift that happened in the 80s, which, that's approximately 40 years from World War II. So, and World War II really did set a lot of things. Like even right now, like what's happening in the world, that was all set at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. Shout out to New Hampshire, where I'm from. That all started up there, and it's taken this long for, whether you agree or disagree, it's taken this long for it to change. So 40 years, it's about the right time where like maybe we start thinking about whether or not this philosophy works. And then culture is very hard to change. And there are a lot of people with vested interest in keeping things the same. And it's really difficult, I think, to just come up with something entirely new.
Absolutely. And what is interesting is that really what's required is not more work. It's just different work. I think what's going to drive this change, Cindi, is pain. If you bring up,
I would love for change to happen without pain.
Yeah, well, good luck. It doesn't happen. I guess evolution, maybe, some sort of evolution without pain, but I don't see it. I think that because organizations have invested so much time and money in the process that they have, that there is this sunk cost fallacy of how do I just make this work? I've done all this. I have this. How do I make this work?
Right. And I think some of it is the alternative isn't clear. Like I talk to people all the time, all these managers, they hate the performance evaluations.
No.
It takes up so much of their time. And to do them well, you have to be like tracking this stuff all year long. Like you have to have a method to actually, otherwise the performance evaluation is only an evaluation of the last 2 months because that's what's in your head, which isn't very fair to employees. So to really do them well, you have to have some sort of method to be collecting that information through the entire year. And then, think about as an employee, because I worked for a university and they would have us like every year fill out our like own version of a performance evaluation where like we had to fill in, all right, this is how much service we did. These were the incidents of service. This is my research. Like there's a template, and like that would take days to do just for me.
Yes.
And somehow my boss at the time, who has, I don't even know, like maybe 10 people underneath him, like he's got to go through and even see if any of the stuff in there actually even makes sense. He's got his own side of the house. Like this is a tremendous amount of time.
Huge.
So they see that it's a problem. I just don't think there have been very good answers as to what the alternatives could be.
Well, I have some great suggestions that are easily applied now, but I want to say that, so on average, leaders spend about 210 hours a year on performance reviews. And so that's 5 weeks out of their year on performance reviews. And if they were helpful, then maybe that's time that's well spent. But the research also shows that about 30% of people after performance reviews have decreased performance because they are demotivated. Because if you talk to employees about performance reviews and what they're getting from that, they're typically past focused. They are not timely. And so I've just done all this great work, and you're pointing out to me the things that I didn't do well over the past 6 months. And you weren't there to actually help me and support me when that was happening. But now we're talking about it in December. And so what I think I've learned about performance reviews is that they were designed to capture the low performers. They are not designed to improve performance. for the average to high performers. And so, yes, we build guardrails to capture the low performers, but do we build an entire system around those people? Or do we build a system that works for average to high performers?
Well, so like, let me just give an analogy here, because I think it's one that everybody can associate with. Like, have you ever been brought into a room full of people to have somebody yell at you for something that one person in that room did?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Come on.
We suggest not doing that, by the
Yes.
way. Like, deal one-on-one. That's what we've done
Yes.
with performance. You're right. Like, the performance appraisals are built around trying to find the people who are not doing their fair share.
Right.
And as a result, we're bringing everybody in to have a conversation that makes everybody feel like they're the low performer.
Exactly. Part of the problem is that we don't teach leaders how to communicate with people. And so, there's this, so we all learn how to communicate from our families growing up. They are our first classrooms when it comes to communication.
And some of them are not very good classrooms.
I always ask, who had a 10 out of 10 experience? I haven't gotten a single hand up for that. Usually I get like big eyes and eye rolls, and no, that wasn't a great experience for everybody. And then you go through school, and where do you learn to communicate there? Friendships, peer relationships, but you don't get any formal learning. Then you move into college or maybe your profession. Where are you learning it there? You're not. And so what's happening is that leaders are promoted into this position, and communication is really a primary responsibility of leadership.
Yeah, I can't remember where I saw it. It was back when I was teaching, so I think it was in a textbook, but like there was some stat that 70% of a middle manager's time is just communication.
Absolutely. And they are, because they're not equipped, and I'm not saying no leaders are equipped, but in general, because we do not equip leaders in this way, they overly rely on the superficial structures that organizations provide to do the communicating. So the way I describe communication in organizations now using performance valuations, it's like a romantic couple communicating only during a therapy session. So it's highly structured, it's infrequent. How functional is that relationship going to be if that's what the communication looks like? And that's what we see in organizations, is that when people don't know how and don't feel comfortable communicating based on the needs of the business, based on their own personal and professional needs, if there is a major break in the process that not only impacts the people involved in this communication, but the organization overall and its actual resilience.
I think it's a really good point. Yeah.
Also, the other point I want to make is that I got this from Crucial Learning. They keep changing their names, but they have this book called The Influencer, and I really love it. And it talks about how for adults, we overestimate motivation as an issue and underestimate ability. Because if you have a leader who is not good at communicating, it's not going to look like somebody raising their hand and asking for help. That feels really threatening, because I know as a leader, communication is an important part of my job. So what you'll see on the outside of that situation is non-compliance, avoidance, not having the conversations they need to. And so we make this assumption that, oh, this person doesn't want to do the right thing, or, and in truth, often it's an ability issue that they don't know how.
It's also potentially a personality issue.
Yeah.
The problem with communication is that we've all been doing it since we were a baby, and so we think we know how to do it.
100%. Every person is walking around with a different North Star. So your North Star is your family experience. So it's like, oh, thank God I'm better than my dad, or I'm just like my mom with this. You could go either way. You could go towards or away from, but that is what everything that you're saying and doing, that is your mental map. That is your lens. And then you're expected to talk to another person or 10 other people or 100 other people with totally different North Stars. And so I think this is where the as people, we get stuck in being right or wrong. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. But that is not the currency of relationships. Being right or being wrong doesn't matter in relationships in terms of the quality of the relationship. Ask any long-term couple, if they totally agree with each other about everything that the other person believes. It doesn't happen. It's not necessary. And so we have this idea at work and in the more formal professional relationships that there's a right and a wrong, and that drives the relationship. And the relationship is separate from that. It's a connection. And so the ability to become a better communicator often involves understanding what your lens is, and that maybe it's right for you, but that doesn't mean that that's the perspective someone else is coming from. And so learning how to connect across different perspectives and different North Stars is really, really important to being able to do it well.
I agree. So tell me a little bit more about your alternative.
Yes. Okay. So we have tons of research that tells us what doesn't work. What doesn't work is infrequent communication. What doesn't work is supervisor only top down evaluations. Those are incredibly subjective. And so we've got this great information about what doesn't work. So you flip that on its head, and this is where we get kind of the new way and the new path forward. And I have 3 easy things that I recommend any company start with if they're trying to make the move. Because like you said earlier, it's incredibly overwhelming to think about. It's like, where do I start? Do I have to redo the whole system? Well, ultimately, eventually, yes, your goal is to move away from what's happening, but there are 3 shifts that you can apply no matter what system you're using. You can start today. And the first is really, really easy, and it's crazy impactful. And that is future.
We like that.
Yeah, I know, right? It's really amazing. If you only do one thing, do this, because it's the easiest, and it's future focused feedback. So a lot of times you can tell somebody the exact same thing with a future focus that you would by saying what they have done wrong in the past. And the problem with past focused feedback is it's incredibly demotivating. If somebody actually cares about their job, if somebody actually cares about their work, hearing what they did wrong 2 weeks ago, 6 months ago that they can now no longer fix is incredibly demoralizing. Also, you can say, you know what? In the future, I think it would be even better if you did this. Same information. You're giving them the exact same really guidance, but instead of hammering them for something, and it doesn't mean you have to do that, but that's often what it feels like for people, even bringing something up that they have done wrong in the past.
Sure, you trigger defensiveness for sure.
Absolutely. And so you instead say, well, in the future, I think it would be even better this way. And there are a few things that happen with that. First, it's feedback with hope. Because there's absolutely nothing I can do about what I've done wrong in the past, but there's something I can do next time I do this activity if you've told me what that is.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of look at it like you're in the woods, and instead of being like, well, you took the wrong path and now like we're in this quagmire.
Yes.
Like instead you're like, okay, we're here.
Yeah.
Here's the path.
Absolutely.
Here's the path out.
Yeah, because mistakes are inevitable. But what's happening is that we're hyper focused on what went wrong and not what went right when we're looking at past performance. And so when we're talking about future performance, not only are you talking about how you could do even better. So it's not this like, oh, that was wrong, that was bad, but this is how you could do even better. And it's something that they could actually take action on and improve. And it's also something that you could help them with. So you can practically help somebody with future focused feedback. You can say, in the future, I think it would be even better if you did this. And here's how I can help you prepare for that or to do that.
Collette, do you have any stories that you could share, like an example?
One of the last people I worked with who applied this future focused feedback, and it was kind of like a side conversation. I had met with this group of entrepreneurs and small business owners, and I was talking about this because a lot of small businesses don't even really have a performance management process, but they're really trying to figure it out and to put something in place.
Yeah.
And so this person applied the future focused feedback after, I was in there talking to her group, and she emailed me, I guess a week later. And she was like, "You are not kidding. I had conversations with my people and it was fantastic. They were so much more engaged. They were so much more involved in the conversation," because that's how you hook average to high performers. These are people who want to do a great job.
Right.
These are people who
we're not worried about the people who are mailing it in, because they're going to mail it in no matter what.
Exactly.
And that's a question of whether or not you're going to keep them around. But
this is food for the average to high performers.
That's right. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the easiest one to apply.
It's powerful. It's definitely powerful. We use that too. I think it was Buckingham, Marcus Buckingham. I don't know if you ever paid attention to his work.
I did.
But I think he's the one who, it's like feed forward, I think is what he calls it. And it like from a communication standpoint, what you're doing that's important is you're keeping people out of defensiveness.
Absolutely.
And you're keeping them open. And so, yes, I mean, you start talking about, you keep somebody out of defensiveness and you start talking about the future, like with exciting possibilities or interesting things that like their job might lead to. Yeah, you're going to have a very different conversation than, okay, this happened. Why did it happen?
Yeah.
Which I understand people are trying to do like an after action review. Like even the people, like some people are trying to blame you.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that even the people who aren't trying to blame you, there's a group of people who are doing basically after action reviews, and they're trying to understand why the problem exists in order to try to undo the problem in the future. And that there's a validity to that, right? Like we do need to be able to find obstacles. The problem is that it always feels like it's landing on the individual, when really, if we're trying to find the obstacles, we're looking more like systematically what's going on.
It's a complex problem.
Yeah. If we're assuming that the employee is a motivated employee and wants to do well, which that's generally my assumption on people. I mean, sure, people disappoint sometimes. But again, those are the people who you probably need to be thinking about walking out the door anyway. For most employees, I think you've got somebody who just, they want to do a good job. They want to be known as good at their job. And so to feel like the blame is being put on them, it's the opposite of what we want to do.
Absolutely. And it's not even just the blame being put on them. It's like disempowering, because it would be one thing to ask questions and say, what do you think happened? What do you think we can learn from that experience to move into this experience? But what it more often looks like is, I'm telling you what went wrong, even though I don't even know your own thoughts about it. You're not even participating in this conversation other than, sitting here to get my evaluation of your work when I don't even know what you know.
Yeah, you're doing your job, and then year-end review, somebody's coming in and they're like, hey, there's a problem here. Let me help out. And you're like, I've been struggling with this problem and figuring things out on my own all year long. Who are you?
Totally. Yeah. And what does that say to you as an employee about how much somebody actually cares about you and your work versus, the CYA aspect of the performance review process?
That's the worst.
Yeah.
I do think that doesn't happen all the time. I think it just depends sort of like, on what you think about the person, the boss in general, and then probably to the degree to which you have an actual connection.
Yeah. I think it can tend to feel like that no matter what the boss's intention is. So I think a lot of leaders are just following the process given to them by the organization. This is what they know to do. It's the best that they know to do. And then employees experience this end of year, like, let's review your progress. If you had problems with it, why weren't you helping me and telling me when it was happening instead of telling me this now at the end of the year?
When it impacts what I'm going to earn.
Exactly. And I think that's the other thing is it's not that poor performance doesn't need to be addressed. Poor performance needs to be addressed in the moment. And annual reviews are more for bigger picture kind of, this is how did you see your work?
This is development.
This is how I see your work. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like annual reviews really should be like strategy sessions for the individual.
Agreed.
Like this is where we're going as an organization. How do you fit in with your skill set and what do we need to develop?
Absolutely. And who can answer that question better than the employee, which is the second piece of the easy change performance model, which is employee-led versus supervisor-led. And so no matter what process you're using, you can incorporate having employees evaluate their own performance, lead conversations, bring what they know to the table before there's some sort of guided or evaluative conversation from the leader. And one of the things that organizations miss out on most by not doing it that way is because when leaders tell employees what they want them to do, employees are going to nod, maybe disagree, but probably mostly disagree silently. You're not going to get much conversation. It's going to be, I'm telling you what you're going to do, and then you're going to at least tell me you're going to do it. If you're not, I'll find out later.
I'll find out when you don't do it.
Exactly.
And I mean, I don't even think it's that insidious a lot of the time too. Like, I just want to throw it out here just as a reality check. Like, I think sometimes employees actually are on board and want to do it, but may be reluctant to admit that they're not exactly sure where the path is. Because we ask people all the time to do things that as a leader, we're not exactly sure. We think it's in the realm of possibility. We're kind of relying on that other person to be like, okay, like, I think maybe I get here. But so like we're relying on an iterative process.
Yes.
But it's in a power dynamic that doesn't really lend itself to much iteration.
That's right. And you can, with that same power dynamic, you can completely shift and have better conversations by having employees lead the conversation. Because what will happen is when the employee answers the question, what's expected of me? What are my priorities? This is, what are my challenges? Whatever. And they're sharing this with the leader. Instantly, the leader knows where there is misalignment. When the employee is saying something that the leader's like, nope, that's not quite what I understand it to be, or no, that's what I meant. And so it's gold because it automatically zooms the conversation in on the spots of misalignment, where the leader can then spend their time addressing those areas and allowing the employee to really own, and then the leader guides and leads and supports, versus spending their whole energy telling employees what to do, but never seeing the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really exposes the gap that makes leadership incredibly powerful, because in those moments, you have the employee who's fully contributing, he's wanting to do better, who's telling you what they know. And often leaders overestimate how clear expectations are for employees. I used to do Gallup engagement surveys for companies a lot. And that very first question, I know what's expected of me at work. Everybody's like, of course, people know what's expected of them at work. And guess what?
I've asked similar questions, and everybody's always like, yes. Everybody fails to see the subjectivity of a job.
Exactly. Right. And so you may have expressed it 50 times, but what somebody received from what you were expressing is going to be different from person to person. It's going to be translated differently. And the only way or the fastest way, I'll say, to find that out is to have employees lead these conversations, give them a list of questions to answer, have them come in prepared to lead the conversation. And you're, as a leader, listening, and you're listening for areas of alignment. You're listening for information you didn't already know. And you're really being very strategic about how you're using your time with that person to create more alignment and progress.
I love it. Yep. It's very good.
And this is where, from moving from manager led to employee led, has a couple of, tricky parts. And one is this illusion of control. And this ability.
Explain what that is. I mean, I think it's somewhat self-explanatory, but
yes. And I think my last piece really hits this illusion of control. But I think it's this. As a manager, if I have a structure given to me by the organization and I know this is the conversation I need to have, I can do task 1, 2, and 3 and follow this rule book and do this thing. But if I'm supposed to just open myself up in a conversation to what I don't know what's going to come out of my employee's mouth, and I need to be skilled enough to be able to manage that, that is terrifying for many people because it feels like you're just dangling them out there. And this employee-led to manager-led, I think, requires the most support in terms of training and really helping people level up in the communication department, so that employees are better equipped to have great conversations.
I'm going to plug my book.
Let me see.
The Uncertainty Playbook by Jeffrey Tumlin and Cindi Baldi. Like, it's totally like, you're right. I mean, uncertainty undoes a lot of people, and there are strategies, and we have 14 strategies in the book about how to deal with uncertainty and the impact of uncertainty at work.
Amazing.
And so that's one of those situations where just developing that muscle of being comfortable with not knowing what's coming. It's the unexpected creativity and the things that I would never think of doing. Like that's the fun part of pulling somebody in and being like, all right, what are you thinking? And seeing what they say.
Totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that for a lot of leaders, what I see is that perfectionism immobilizes them, that leaders don't feel like they have the ability completely. And so they're a little worried that they don't have the enough or the right ability. And then there's, if they can't do it perfectly, they don't want to do it at all because they feel that heavy burden and responsibility of leadership and of being a leader. And what I talk to leaders about is really reframe what good communication looks like. Good communication doesn't look like perfect conversations every time. It will not happen. You are only in charge of 50% of any conversation. So you can't know how it's going to go. The way to be a good communicator is to learn to recover and repair when things inevitably go sideways, and they will. And that's how you are a good leader. That's how you do it. It's not waiting until the timing is perfect, the message is perfect. It's about connecting when it's needed, when it's the most important time to connect, and then navigating that and figuring it out as you go along. But you don't have to do it perfectly.
You don't have to do it perfectly. I will say, though, that considering timing is part of a good communication skills, and looking for patterns where you and this particular person get tripped up. Like these are good practices.
Absolutely.
But I agree that you don't have to wait for perfection. You just are trying to find a moment that isn't likely to be terrible. So for example, at the end of the day, when people are exhausted, you probably shouldn't be having deep conversations that require, creativity in the brain being fully engaged.
Yeah.
Right. Because by the end of the day, people are exhausted. So those conversations probably need to happen earlier in the day.
That's true. And if it's employee led, once this kind of practice starts getting in motion, it's not the manager who's approaching employees for conversations. It's employees who are approaching the manager when they need help, when there is an issue, when there's a problem. When employees are allowed to take ownership for their own performance, that is what it looks like. It's not the manager planning the conversation. It's as needed when it's happening conversations. And that brings us to the third piece of the performance management easier change is this control-based versus accountability-based model. So right now it is very—
that's important. So elaborate a little bit on that, I think.
Yeah. So this is managers are in a really tricky spot because what I see happening over and over again is that managers are feeling responsible for changing an employee's performance and for changing their behavior. And that's the job that they think is theirs. And guess what? That's an impossible task. You cannot make another adult do anything that they don't want to do. And I have a 7-year-old. You can't make a kid do anything that they don't want to do. It doesn't
and I think
work.
that's a source of a lot of frustration for managers.
Absolutely, because they feel like the organization has tasked them with improving employee performance, and the way that the structure is set up now, that's what it looks like. I have a performance conversation. My word is the word, and then I'm supposed to change it for the employee. And it's a very codependent system because what happens is supervisors then stay focused on things that they can't control, and they don't take action on things that they can control. So as a supervisor, I can't make you perform any differently than you are. I can influence you. I can talk to you about it. At the end of the day, it's in your hands as an employee. What I can do is choose what work you're doing on my team. I can choose whether or not you remain on my team. I can maybe even choose whether or not you remain in the organization. Those are my choices as a supervisor. And what's happening is the accountability that we have set up with traditional performance is trying to make the supervisor responsible for the employee's behavior. But when you switch it up and make it employee-led, you are more balanced and aligned with the truth, which is that employees get to choose what they do. They always have and they always will. So when we're honest about that, we can place accountability and responsibility where it belongs. If an employee, if you've had multiple conversations with an employee about performance and it's not changing, then you have choices. They might not be choices that you like, but you have choices. And one of those choices is not, can I make this employee do something? But I think there's one other little piece that is that makes this an easy trap to fall into, which is if I'm a leader and I have an employee that's underperforming, I feel like a bad leader. This is affecting my ego. This is affecting my image.
Well, they may not be wrong in feeling like they're going to be held accountable, because I do think that like their leadership may also be making them feel like that.
Right.
Like, are
Absolutely.
you addressing the issue? And there's more than one way to do something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think sometimes the managers get stuck on, well, I'm the manager, you do what I say, as being very prescriptive over somebody's behavior. But if you don't have some of the flexibility, like with how you're interacting with people and accepting that this accountability is more outcome based.
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as, you know, they're not harming people in the way and they're getting the job done, and I think those are probably the two big pillars.
Yeah.
Then that's what you're looking for. They don't have to do it exactly the way that you would do it. And sometimes they do it better than you, because they're living in it all the time and they figure out, like, again, people are hugely creative.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think that's one of the trip ups that managers get. And then like they have this pressure from above. Well, why isn't this happening? Mm-hmm. And it does. And it's this trickle down of leaders telling you what to do in a very prescriptive way, and the structures reinforce it. And it's them not having clear ideas of what the outcome is. And so instead of monitoring and holding accountable based on outcome, they're monitoring based on like process and time in the chair.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I have had many, many conversations with executive teams where executives are not doing performance reviews at all. They're not receiving them for sure. And many times they're not even giving them. So they're kind of immune to this normal, typical communication process and feedback. And the farther away people get from actually two-way communication, the more, I'm going to say unreasonable, the more unreasonable that can become, because it's, it's at that point an ideal. Like, as an executive, I'm not actually doing this thing that I'm asking you to do. I'm just holding you responsible for figuring that out. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for convincing executives that they're losing performance and they're losing money, frankly, by continuing to use these stale old systems that they have, that they're leaving a lot on the table. And I think typically that's what it takes to convince people to look at making a change. Understandably, because man, if what I'm doing has gotten me to this point where I'm kind of at the top of my game when it comes to my career, I'm not inclined to make a big shift, it's going to be really hard. Even if it's true that something different would be better, where does that put me? I think we start to see more insecurity again. And that's what I've experienced when just working through this with leadership teams, is that at the end of the day, there's just a whole lot of insecurity around, am I a good leader? Am I good at this, or am I still good at this? Because the pace of change is so consistent, fast. And so it's like, well, I was good at this last year, but am I still the best? Am I still good at this? And so I think this insecurity is what feeds a lot of the people overly dependent on the process that the organization has to do these things, instead of trying and learning and feeling like that it's something that they could possibly figure out how to do better on their own outside of those processes. So that is such a great point, Cindi, because really the senior leadership sets the tone for the rest of the organization.
Right. I totally agree. And if there's a leader up there who has any instability, that does actually come down. It does trickle down and have its own impact. It may not be like instability spreads instability, but like that person may just be trying to control too much versus the accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. I just spoke at a leadership workshop for a fraternity. So it was the youngest group I've worked with recently.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. But someone had a question about, well, so what do I do when I try to push ideas up and they just get shut down or not even responded to? And I said, well, you have to realize where you are and where they are. Where the people that you're talking to have many of the ideas that are in place now were probably theirs, were things that they either supported or put in place. And so it would be really, really hard to hear that something different might work better, or, it would be a struggle for any human being to hear that, even if it's the right thing, even if making a change is a good thing, the initial response is going to be hard. And then here you are, brand new in your career. And so, of course, all you want to do is change things because you have nothing to lose. Whenever you come up across a roadblock, why not? Why not push back? Why not try to change? You literally have nothing to lose. You haven't built up decisions and credits and all of the things. So I think also understanding that, executives aren't trying to be difficult. They're really trying to do a really great job, and their perspective becomes much more, the higher up you get in your career, the more protective you become instead of open. And so that's a natural response. And I'm still, when I work with teams, exploring how to address that because it's such a natural thing, but that's where the change really either starts or stops is, I think, with that group. So truly in order to start making this change, you can keep whatever system you have in place and start trying to make these shifts toward future-focused feedback, employee-led conversations, and accountability-based outcomes so that we align, especially that last piece is really around aligning people with the work that they can actually accomplish, that they're actually responsible for, instead of making people
and kind of excited about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
I just want to say that if you are using the old process, you're normal. This is not failure. You're with most other people are still doing this.
If you're even thinking about changing the process, you're vanguard.
Absolutely. Yes. And I also want to say that it is not more work. It is not more work. I would like to say it's less work. People that I'm working with are in the earlier stages of this. I believe in the long run, it is less work, but it is certainly not more work. And it's better work to do this because the effort that you're putting in, you can really start to see improvements in the way people are working together and functioning, and partnerships are being created between employees and leaders, not just this top-down situation. So it doesn't require more work. It just requires commitment to make the change.
Right. And being okay with going where few people have trod before.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell people how they can reach you. And anything else that you want to plug? This is your shameless plug moment.
My shameless plug moment. Well, I do have a great communication training that I use with intact teams. So usually I do it with leaders and their direct reports. And it's taking everybody through this process from the ground up of really doing some self-evaluation and thinking through the messages that you learned growing up that you're still bringing into your career, thinking through how that shapes how you're showing up today, and what your triggers are and what you want to change. So really taking everyone through this process so that at the end of this workshop, teams and leaders really have a better understanding of each other. And beyond that, I think what I've heard is that they're more brave. They're more able to understand that there is not a right and a wrong, one right and one wrong way to do this. That
life is not that simple.
It is not that simple. And that it's okay to just be human and understand yourself and just try. Just start where you are and try some new techniques, try to do better. But I think that upskilling is a really critical part to making this sort of change, because it does require the ability for employees to be able to talk about their performance and to speak up to their supervisors. And that can be a really hard thing to do. And it also requires leaders to be able to view their role as leaders in a different way and to be more okay with less control, but more impact. And so if you're interested, you can reach me at Collette at myopen360.com, or you can just go visit our website at myopen360.com. Or I'm also on LinkedIn posting all the time, so you can reach out to me there too.
So Collette and I have decided
Yeah.
that for the comment section, if you're game to play this game, we want to know when the last time your performance evaluation was successful.
Yeah. When was the last time your process worked for you? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Last time process worked for you. Okay. I like that. I think that's good. And it's not as negative as sometimes it feels. Because we don't like the negative all the way around. We'd rather be functional and more motivating. All right, Collette. Thank you for joining us. And Colette's going to be back, by the way. She's coming back with a partner.
Yep.
That's coming in the future. So Collette will be back. All right. Thank you all for joining us today on Management Muse. We appreciate you. Subscribe, like, stars, find us on LinkedIn or wherever. It's all good. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Sarah and Rebecca. And then just as a last minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.